Game stacks are back, baby, with week number 10 here in the NFL. We've actually got some totals that are not too shabby on this week 10 NFL DFS main slate. And honestly, the pieces within them may not be perfect, but we have paths upside. We haven't had that for a while in NFL DFS. So I'm pretty jazzed about this slate. We're going to break down the week 10 NFL DFS main slate for today with Brandon Gdula. We're going to talk about game stacks, talk about key trends, key injuries, and much more to get you ready for Sunday. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on Twitter at Gdula13. Find his work over at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, week number 10 is here and game stacks are back. How are you doing today?
I'm good. A lot of thoughts in the head. We've talked a bit about this slate already, and I think we're in large agreement where there's a lot of good plays, a lot of ways to go, but that means fewer certainties. So I'm sure we'll argue a lot despite being very, very close, just because that's how it works. Also realize I'm wearing a Ravens hat, so I'm probably going to turn back around and swap it out so no one has any ideas. I'm not a fan of any team, but I'm talking about the Browns defense. So like, it's weird. I just don't want to cause any conflict. So I'll probably turn around at one point. I'm trying to eye up which one I'm going to switch to, but
what are my options?
Lots going on.
I can choose for you. Just give me like 3 options and I'll pick for you. I see a wolf. Take the Wolves hat. Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards. Like Rudy had 17 and 20 last night. Let's go. I'm morphing back into a Wolves fan now that they're fun again. So
it's got a shorter brim, so I don't wear it a lot.
Okay. The underbrim though is cool.
Yeah, that's with it is.
All the podcast people are like, these idiots. We can't see what they're talking about. But like FanDuel TV Plus people are jazzed. They are just jamming.
They're like, start talking about football. Like, what is this?
I mean, the FanDuel TV Plus people probably are on TV too, so they can see your stylistic underbrim as well. Underbrim sounds very weird, and I don't know if I should say that term. They're on bye. The Dolphins are on bye.
That works.
Okay. You don't want the Wolves hat? I asked for the Wolves hat. Now that's why we'll argue. It's not because of differentiation in plays, but because you disregarded my advice.
It doesn't even look good with the shirt now. It is terrible. This is amateur hour.
Put the Wolves one back on. That goes well with that color. Okay, good. Well done. So I think that what Brandon's alluding to is there are a lot of good plays on this slate, but there aren't many no-brainer plays. And I think that's kind of the key issue with this slate is there are a lot of guys we like, not a ton of guys we love, but there are a lot of games that I love. And I think that's what I like for DFS, is having games I can stack. And we've got that for this week. So we've got games we can stack. Brandon's got the Timberwolves hat back on. I'm ready to go. Let's break down this week 10 main slate for NFL DFS. Before we do that, though, got to give you a quick reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear Tom Vecchio talking about the Wolves, I assume, and others, you can find that every weekday on the Daily ISO. No show for tomorrow because it is Veterans Day observed. So no show for tomorrow for the Daily ISO, but there will be one for this Thursday, small slate. So find that in the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Tom's shows are also up on the FanDuel TV Plus app on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku devices. Also at FanDuel.com/watch. Log in via your FanDuel account. You can watch Up and Adams there, run it back there, Monday through Thursday. You can watch Heat Check, Covering the Spread, Daily ISO, all in the same place, along with some shows from The Ringer. So all in one place. FanDuel TV Plus. Find that FanDuel.com/watch or the FanDuel TV Plus app on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku devices. Don't forget, we have our free roll every single week on FanDuel Research. Go to FanDuel.com/research to find the link for that free roll up on the homepage. There will be a link for the free play. Click on that link and then find the link to the free play within that page for the Week 10 NFL DFS free roll. Again, no entry fee to get yourself entered for a shot at some free cash if you fill out a slick lineup. Speaking of FanDuel, the NFL Sunday Million is live on FanDuel. Put your NFL knowledge to the test and create your best 9-player roster while staying under the salary cap. Then use FanDuel's live scoring feature. Follow along as you compete for your share of $1.2 million in prizes. First place taking home $200,000, all for just a $9 entry fee. You got Joe Burrow, Christian McCaffrey, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all in the field on Sunday. Plenty of big names to use in your lineup. Sunday is coming in hot, so head over to FanDuel and get in your lineup today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. The 3 players listed in this read are the 3 games we're discussing in the bookmaker section. So kudos to Justin for writing up this read. Nice job, Justin. You did it. You nailed all 3 of our key games. Spoiler alert there. Let's dig into our slate overview here for week number 10. And Brandon, I think the key thing for me is back to basics for this slate, where I'm getting back to the place I feel most comfortable with NFL DFS, which is finding games I like, stacking them in different ways, finding combinations of game stacks. And it's not going to be perfect. Like, all those guys have issues for sure, but I like being back to the basics there. What's the overview for you in week number 10?
Yeah, trying to narrow down any. I mean, there's like some borderline core plays. Like, for me, true priorities that I want to, like, if I'm building one lineup, I'm like, I want to start my lineup. I don't know who I'm starting my lineup with this week. Like, even one player necessarily. I have like a few guys who are in that conversation. I'd say like Tank Dell is probably someone I'm really going to go out of my way for.
Sure.
But yeah,
Aaron Jones is there for me.
He's
there.
Close.
Sorry, there-ish. No, you're right.
Like, and that's the whole thing we're gonna get into this week. Is I'm gonna come at it slightly more pessimistic. Jim's gonna be more optimistic.
Shocker.
It's gonna sound like we disagree, and we're gonna agree. But no, I think, like, I'm probably gonna say a lot of people are game stack dependent. This week my main lineup is gonna be more like, if I have a certain, it depends on which quarterback I land on, I'm more likely to play guys from that game as opposed to sort of one-offs or anything like that. But if I had to kind of say something different than what you said, is at what point do we, when we're lacking certainty, do we just try to prioritize Christian McCaffrey?
Sure. And I think that's a good question to ask. And I would also say that I think we can get there this week. And I say think because I'm not positive. When we look at like value plays for this week, there aren't a lot in like the 5,000 range at either running back or wide receiver. And that's why it's like I'm not fully certain we can get there. I think we can, because there are enough guys who I like in the mid range, both at receiver and running back, but it's not a lock that I can get there. So we'll talk about what to do with McCaffrey, which value plays we do like, and much more in just 1 second. Let's start things off, though, by going through key injuries impacting this Week 10 main slate. The biggest one, I think, at least, is that Kyler Murray is back. He has been named the starter for Week 10, barring a setback, and they also may get James Conner back. James Conner designated to return from IR this week, limited in practice on Wednesday. Amari DiMercado sat out of practice, while Michael Wilson returned to a limited session. You'll talk through the Cardinals with Kyler in the trend section. Jamar Chase dealing with a back injury and didn't practice on Wednesday. Sounds like there's a legitimate shot he doesn't play this week, but also T. Higgins hurt his hamstring in practice on Wednesday, so unclear what his status will be, apparently walking around gingerly in the locker room. Not ideal. Other side of that game, Dameon Pierce missed another practice with his ankle injury, so Devin single digits might have to be a topic of discussion. We'll talk more about the Bengals and Texans in the bookmaker section. Deebo Samuel, full go on practice on Wednesday. Trent Williams didn't practice, their left tackle. Might not make it back. It sounds like they want to have him practice today on Thursday and see how it goes. In that same game, Zay Jones got in a limited practice, still working with the rehab group, so he might not be back yet. We'll cover that game in the bookmaker section. Justin Jefferson designated to return for the Vikings. Sounds like he won't play, but positive sign for him entering week 11. KJ Osborne missed practice with a concussion. Cam Akers done for the year with a second torn Achilles, which is a big bummer for him. It's been both legs now, so extra big bummer for Akers. Alexander Madison's salary is $6,200, and I think if we want to get to McCaffrey, he'd be one of the considerations to help us get there. But we also know that Madison is very flawed, and they tried to replace him for a reason. So they're at home against the Saints. Is that salary on Madison low enough to draw you in?
I don't think so. It's a good enough defense. His efficiency numbers are awful.
Yeah.
The rushing yards over expectation, terrible success rate. Like, I think if you're going to try to play McCaffrey, you got to be open to like wide receiver in the flex this week to make it work. I don't really foresee enough on the bring back side. I like Olave fine. But I don't see enough bring back value for me to get to Madison. Am I too low on him?
No, I'm receptive to him, but it's like a begrudging acceptance is what I would say.
Yeah.
And like I think it's a break glass in case of emergency situation. Like if I have a lineup I really like and need to get down to Madison in order to make it work, I'm willing to at least give that some consideration. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I say this a lot with golf, but like I'm not going to talk anyone out of Madison this week, but I'm also not going to be able to talk anyone or myself into him as a priority, which again is just going to be the running theme of the show for me. Is a lot of guys are in the conversation. Just I can't really plant my flag in too many.
Yeah, in the 3 games without Akers before he got there, Madison averaged 13 carries and 5.7 targets per game, but really bad efficiency, 38.2% red zone share, but he kept fumbling. I know that like Ty Chandler has not earned any work, so maybe like Madison continues to have like a decent role, and his salary is low. And I would say like if we're talking about like, name that salary, I would say I'd probably put him around 66 or so. So like he is objectively under salaried, but like I don't know what the best case scenario is for him. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Break glass in case of emergency, I think is where I'm at with Madison for right now. Drake London able to get in a limited practice on Wednesday, seems to be trending toward a return this week. They get the Cardinals, whose defense is hideous. So London's salary is $6,500. Kyle Pitts, 53. I guess Johnny Smith is 55 or so. Any interest in those guys given the matchup?
Well, I like the other side, as we'll get into in the trend section. Pretty sure you said you're on the under in this game.
Only because it got high enough. Like it's not like
Yeah.
I don't think 43.5 is egregious. I just, I have it at 41 point something, and it's 2 points. I take it. So yeah.
I also know you like a particular running back from this team.
I might like both running backs in this game if Connor is back, actually.
What what better to summate our feelings on this slate if you like James Conner and we're looking at like, I mean, every back's a committee back at this point except like McCaffrey and maybe ETN or something, but like, boy, this is it feels like such a fun slate, but it's so
Yeah.
maddening as you go back and forth on every single player.
I do think Pitts is in play at 53. Even if London is back, in play is not a ringing endorsement. I think McBride is a lot better play on the opposing side at 51, but he's in play at least. And with Bijan, it's really just because like he's a very talented player. And if he's gonna score, if he's gonna like pay off for DFS, he needs a long touchdown. But his odds of a long touchdown increase against a defense like this. So I feel like to me, that's why I could be there. The salaries come down. I prefer Aaron Jones at 68 over Bijan, but I might need to use both to get to McCaffrey.
Yeah.
So it's a situation where I would not use him above Jones, but I might use him in concert with Jones in order to get leverage elsewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with regards to the Pitts, I think it depends on like again your perspective on the tight end slate. Like,
It's a
look, if
pretty
you can
good
get
tight
Mark
end slate.
what's that?
It's a pretty good tight end slate,
It's again, it's
Like
in
you
game
agree that
stacked.
McBride
Like,
is a legit good play, correct?
yeah,
And I think that
he's
both
the one.
Hawkinson and Laporta are solid plays, even
Yes,
considering salary. And that's pretty good.
solid. Yes,
Like
but we
three
have two
solid
ups.
guys at tight end is something we don't typically get to.
But that means okay, three solid guys. All right, is Pitts worth pivoting away from McBride often? Probably not. And then we have two names with like tangible upside, maybe the matchup or the role or is whatever. But
Yeah.
Andrews again in a terrible matchup, high salary, even though it could be higher. And then Taysom Hill's doing stuff. So like, if you don't like those guys and you're
Yeah.
maybe a little bit low on Hawkinson, like sure, Pitts makes sense. It just depends on your perspective on some of these other names.
Yeah. I think that's very fair for sure.
Also, Dalton Schultz is like a stud right now. So
Yeah. I'm always worried with him because like he spiked initially when Tank Dell got hurt and like he keeps producing with Dell being back, but I feel a little bit like uncertain about it, I guess. But
his I have a note on him in my helper.
burn
I'm
it
just
now.
gonna
Let's
pull it up
go.
this way.
Let's do it.
Uh Past 4 in-game market shares, 31%, 29, 21, and 29%.
That's pretty good. And Tank Dell played in all but one of those. He got hurt in one of them, but like he played full in 2 of those. So maybe I should be higher on Schultz. David Montgomery back this week for the Lions. They're also getting their interior offensive line healthy. So the Lions are like the healthiest they've been all year, and they've been like a juggernaut. Love it. We'll talk about them in their matchup with the Chargers later on. Tommy DeVito will start for the Giants with Daniel Jones on IR. The Giants' implied total this week is negative. They're implied to score negative points. But so we know this torpedoes the Giants. Like, that's a given. How are you viewing the Cowboys in such a slanted game?
I think that if they're going to get, like, if Tony Pollard's going to keep playing the snaps and getting some opportunities eventually, like his only touchdowns this year came against the Giants. He hasn't scored since week 1. The game logs look bleak. I totally understand that. The salary is up, so you're not even like quote unquote buying low to roster him, but he's still playing elevated snaps. He can, not that this game is, I think, has many paths to being competitive, but if it is, he's going to be on the field. And it's one of those where, like, look, if they run away with it, it might be because he scores twice. It might also not. That's the risk you take, but I do think there's still upside here with this profile. Hard to read what the consensus will be on Pollard. So what are your thoughts on him?
I think that I still have concerns about the ceiling because of the game script. Like, best case scenario, 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, and not a lot of receiving work, so they probably won't need to throw that much.
I don't think that's his best case. I think his best case is like 130 scrimmage yards because he has like,
yeah. Okay. I mean, that's probably fair. The yardage has been better than the touchdown scoring this year, at least. So that's a mark in his favor as well. So I don't feel the need to use him.
Right.
Actually, I don't know. Maybe I do. So, like, this is bad. This is a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. I will put like FOMO lineups in like the lower dollar entries. Like, I don't have any Tony Pollard in my like single entry and like the lineups I care about. So I'll put some like FOMO lineups out there, and like he might be in the FOMO zone this week where it's like, I don't really want to use him, but I guess I probably should because I know that he can burn me for not using him, I guess.
He still can burn us at this salary. It's not 88. It's not, I mean, it's, what was he, like 66 last week and didn't do much of anything.
Like, what do you think about him versus Mixon?
So I've been thinking about Mixon more and more since you mentioned T. His role's been really, really good. Burrow, look, we love the data here, but like Burrow looks healthy. He's been scrambling more. I think it's 1.6 scrambles per game over his past 5 after not scrambling at all in his first 3. And I think it's 4 over the past 2 games. So like he's on the move more. He's looking good. Mixon's red zone role is like pretty impeccable. I don't know if he still has, but up to a couple weeks ago, he's got a 96.2% red zone rushing share.
His overall red zone share is 44.3%, which is tremendous.
Yeah, so
it's a tough matchup from a rushing perspective. Houston tends to funnel work towards the pass, but like I feel like I prefer Pollard over Mixon, but like I see issues with both, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean, look at the targets, look at the receiving. There's some stuff there for him. And if like T's not 100%, I mean, I feel like T's always going through something at this point. Yeah. But that could lead to more for Mixon. I think it comes down to the general philosophy of, do you want someone with the better matchup, but the game might get out of hand? And that's Pollard. Right. Or do you want the chance that like this game goes and is 38-35 and Mixon's just on the field a ton? Like, I think Mixon, I feel like we're doing like so much roster construction talk during the injury section, but I think it's really relevant.
Yeah, it is.
Like Pollard, Mixon, if Montgomery's a full go, I can't get to Saquon.
No.
Like Rashad White, I think he's 4th or 5th in snap rate among Main State running backs. Like,
pretty tough matchup against Tennessee. But
right.
He gets a lot of passing game work at least.
So like I think between Pollard, Mixon, I haven't really thought about Montgomery a lot, but
We'll talk
you got
about it in the
options.
bookmaker
Yeah.
section. But
Any other Cowboys?
no, maybe
Yeah.
Ferguson. But like again, it's a good tight end slate, so probably not.
Yeah.
I think Ferguson is the most worth considering because like implied total matters so much at tight end. But like honestly, no. That game's gonna be really boring.
CeeDee Lamb's got 30 targets over his past 2 games.
As he should. I can't wait for Thanksgiving. Just go 100%. I don't know who they're playing, but like it's just fun to watch. It's fun to have exposure to Dak and CeeDee Lamb when they do well. Like it's just a delightful feeling.
Yeah.
The Titans named Will Levis their starter going forward. Treylon Burks unlikely to play this week due to a concussion. We'll talk about the Titans in the trend section. They've made it. Cool. Kenneth Walker and Jackson Smith-Njigba both missed practice Wednesday due to injuries. Chest injury for Walker, a hip for Smith-Njigba. We'll talk about the passing game later on, but real quick, what would your interest level be in Zach Charbonnet if Walker were to sit?
Yeah, like season-long sleeper, darling. Charbonnet can get receiving work. I don't love this game overall.
Okay.
But boy, at that salary, that changes things.
Yeah.
You know, I went to Singletary last week a little bit. Didn't work out, but I think the talent level here is probably a little different.
Yep.
So that salary, let's say for sure, Walker's out.
I'm in.
Like 100%.
No, but
Okay.
I'm in. I think if you get this
Well,
backfield,
in could be like 20%.
no, not for me. In to me, it's 60 to 70.
Okay.
But like with this backfield, I feel like if one of them is out, you use the other guy. Like I think it's kind of one of those situations. Like it's akin to me for like if Debo is out, use George Kittle. I think that's what this backfield is going to be because it's a valuable backfield to have. It's a good offense, good matchup, and both guys have the ability to have pop games. I think maybe with Charbonnet, it's more of a projection, but like I do think that's within his range of outcomes. So if we get no Walker, Charbonnet to me would be a tremendous option, like 60 to 70% type option.
So he's at 1.14 rushing yards over expectation per carry. He's got a 47% rushing success rate. We know he can catch the ball.
Right.
Coincidentally, though, his catch rate over expectations down. But if I were playing like 5 lineups and we know for sure he's the guy, I think I'd feel comfortable putting him in all 5.
Probably.
Maybe 4, but
yeah. I'm into that personally. Curtis Samuel got in a limited practice Wednesday with his toe injury. He was out or limited the past 2 games, which is part of why Jahan Dotson went nuts. How much would Samuel playing impact your view of McLaurin, Logan Thomas, and Dotson in this game?
I don't know. Maybe it sounds like you're higher on this game than I am.
I bet the under on this one too.
Okay.
I don't want the fact that I bet unders on certain games to influence my view of it for DFS because I understand why the total is where it is. But like, yeah, I'm not super high on it either.
Like McLaurin's salary is in that range. The 6,000 range at receiver is really good.
Yeah,
I just feel like these guys, when there's like too many names. I know they're throwing the ball a ton.
Yeah,
there's like too many names. I could see myself maybe with like a stack, like a mini stack with just 2 of the receivers here to differentiate. But other than that, not really getting there unless you see something with like Geno Smith to like build stacks around him. I think he's probably the only QB under 7,000, but
I'm going to use the passing game of the Seahawks. Like I love DK Metcalf and I like Lockett enough. But like, do I like it enough to have a bring back here when I could instead mini stack a different game? Or do I like just DK as like a one-off? Yeah, I think I'd lean DK as a one-off personally. Especially if Samuel's back, that makes it a lot easier to avoid them.
Do you like any quarterbacks under 75?
They're more Lawrence. Than I know he hasn't done it this year, but like I still think
Lawrence or Geno?
Lawrence at 71.
Okay.
What about you?
I had Geno. I think he's fine.
I think Geno's fine. I'm going to talk about him in the trend section, but I prefer Tutty Trev. I know he's gotten the nickname
Does he
back.
have any touchdowns?
No, 0 touchdowns the entire year for Trevor Lawrence. He's never had a touchdown in his life. Let's move on to our bookmaker section for week number 10 and start things off here by talking about the highest total on the slate. That is the Lions and the Chargers, 48.5, with the Lions favored by 3 on the road. Lions coming back off their bye. They get David Montgomery back, so the backfield could be pretty messy here, but we have guys who get targets in this game on both sides, potentially both quarterbacks in play as well. How are you viewing this game from a stacking perspective?
I really want to like it more than I do currently. I like both quarterbacks. It's a 2 QB game, but I don't think either of them are my priority quarterbacks, which is weird for like the top game of the week. Would love to get to Amon-Ra St. Brown as always. I love receivers who have just target shares like that.
Yeah.
Don't know if I can really make it work, even if I'm building with sort of the more mid-range receivers and running backs. Just is a little tricky. Then I get into like the Amon-Ra St. Brown versus ETN kind of conversation, and I'm probably leaning ETN there. But Laporta, Sam Laporta, love him as a tight end. Probably the first place I'm looking if I'm not playing Trey McBride. Probably going to stay away from the backfield, but
both backfields or
no, just the Lions backfield.
Yeah,
I would not be surprised if Montgomery just returns to a great workload though.
I'm assuming he will. Like he played too well to lose his role. I know Gibbs played too well too, but like,
but lose his role or like reduce the role.
I think it'll be reduced enough where he's probably not a great value at 75 because like the pass catching wasn't there to begin with him. And like now it definitely won't be there because like Gibbs' big issue before was pass blocking. And I think he got better at that as time went along. So like I think he's earned a bigger chunk. So that makes Montgomery probably had to play at 75. I think Gibbs is probably to play at 82. I would say that like eventually we'll be back on this backfield. Because I just need the salaries to come down a bit. But like I think that it's a valuable enough backfield where both guys can be in play simultaneously. So once salaries come down, I'll be there. But for week 10 specifically, I'm okay missing out if they do burn me. Now, Austin Eckler, like I had the Chargers on Monday night and I thought he was going to blow it for me. Like keeps dropping passes. Some of them were inaccurate, but touchdown equity is very good. You look at the overall workload, still got 7 targets and had 14 carries. So I know Detroit's defense has played very well this year, and that's admirable. But like Eckler at 9,000, I like him quite a bit, and it's easier for me to get there than, with McCaffrey. I still want to get to McCaffrey, but I would say Eckler is like a very good consolation prize and is a consideration for my primary lineup for this week. What about you? Where are you at on Eckler?
Should be higher. His efficiency is just bad, and it historically can be bad, but he gets really, really high leverage work. In his active games, 57% red zone rushing share. The overall red zone workload, 38% of the team's carries and targets in the red zone. Again, just in his active games. I can only play him, I feel like, if I like the game. I like the game. Mm-hmm. I should stack it. But if I go Eckler, Goff, Laporta, it's a pretty easy thing to talk myself into. I don't know what that does to the rest of the lineup. Naturally, I'd like Amon-Ra St. Brown in there, but that's probably too tricky.
Sure.
Instead of Laporta, just so I'm not double stacking there. But there's just not a lot of value. This though, and boy, there's going to be a lot of like epiphanies throughout the show. If we get Charbonnet, this kind of thing is a lot easier to do.
It is. How do you feel about Goff versus Herbert for this week?
I'm always going to prefer Herbert to Goff just because he can do a little bit more with the legs, especially in like competitive games. It's not always there, but you can see something there, and he's got multiple. He got 3 rushing touchdowns? Yeah, this year. So I would lean Herbert. Probably wouldn't like fault anyone for going Goff here. Are these guys?
I think they're in the same tier for me. Honestly,
it's like same tier, but where do they stack up relative to the full slate?
So if we get at least one of Higgins or Chase healthy, I'd rank them below Burrow.
Yeah.
Um, if they're both out, then Burrow gets lowered. I think they're above Stroud for me, given he's on the road, facing a good defense coordinator, playing outdoors. So I'd rank them above Stroud, I think. I don't know. They might wind up being I think it's pretty murky for me. Like at quarterback right now, like I don't know how I want to rank it given the uncertainty of the Bengals, but like I think they're worth considering. I don't know. I probably should go Herbert, but like that finger injury bothers me. I don't know, maybe just because it looks weird, like with his like
Yeah.
middle finger wrapped. But like it just bothers me a bit, and we haven't seen a ton of efficiency without Mike Williams, and now Josh Paul or Palmer's out too. So I don't know, a little bit murky. I think I should probably be higher on like Amon-Ra St. Brown, honestly, than I am. $8,600 for him.
But how do you like? Talk to me about him first.
So if we're looking at the overall landscape at wide receiver for this week, Jamar Chase, I think has a shot to not play. CeeDee Lamb, slanted game script. I prefer St. Brown over Keenan Allen because they're basically the same guy, except St. Brown's a bit younger, like not to be ageist, but like a bit younger, a little bit lower salaried. Like I think Amon-Ra might be my favorite high salaried receiver this week.
He's mine.
Okay, cool.
But is he enough of a priority that you go out of your way to build around him? And if so, like where are you? Look,
I think it all depends on what game I'm stacking, you know?
And that's what I was getting back to is like, look, if for whatever reason I move away from Murray or I don't Kyler Murray, a quarterback, like a Kyler and Trey McBride stack, probably going to be the most logical start to lineups this week for me. But if I don't find a way to run it back or don't feel comfortable, and I'm like, why don't I just stack a game? It's probably the first game I'm looking to at this point with the Bengals falling apart all of a sudden. So I gotta make some edits to some content I've done. But then it's St. Brown. If I'm playing St. Brown in the main lineup, I'll play Goff. Like I'm not worried about that. But then what do? Do you get to Keenan? Do you try to jam in Eckler? At that point, it gets really tough really quick.
That's the biggest issue.
How are you stacking this game primarily?
That's the biggest issue is you need to go to the studs because like Quentin Johnston, like you don't expect a lot out of guys against the Jets, given how good their cornerbacks are. But like there's like a sign from a protest where it says our expectations were low, but holy F. And it's kind of like that's my read on Quentin Johnston. You know, I guess he's like in play at 59, but like I really don't wanna. So I don't think there's a value play I like here.
And there's just not enough value plays in other games as of Thursday
to
say like, look, you can make this happen. There's a lot of quote unquote value in the 6,000 range at running back. There's enough at running back. There's a lot at receiver, but that doesn't do enough. And they're also like, defenses kind of dry up in terms of salaries. Like you can't even fully punt. Like it goes 3,000, 32, 35, 36, 37. Like there's not even multiple defenses you can just plug in at like 33 or something.
Yeah. So it's tough. Not a lot of value here. So I think that my view of it will hinge on how much value we get elsewhere. So if we get a Charbonnet, if I decide to use single digits again, like, you know, if we get value elsewhere, if I decide to go Lawrence, potentially. But one spot we could get some value is in the Texans at the Bengals, where right now the total for this game is at 47 points, and the Bengals are 6.5-point favorites for this one. The total was 46.5, got up to 48, and then got bet down to 47 with the T. Higgins news. And spread was, I think, 8 on the look ahead and is now 6.5. So that bodes well for a back and forth game. But now both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are banged up. That throws a wrench into all of this. So are you okay going right back to the Texans this week, coming out their explosion? And what's your view of the Bengals side here?
Yeah, this is one I'm like reacting to because, you know, this is just sort of, you know, I was expecting to be able to come in to this show this week and talk about the Bengals because I thought this was the one standout team, and a lot changed as of, you know, yesterday afternoon with practice reports. Um, that's not going to change my view on Tank Dell. I think Tank Dell at 64 is a standout play across the board. He's someone that I would put into a flex if I needed to, but he's going to be in my receiver slot to begin with. So I feel good there. I think Stroud is it sounds like I'm a bit higher on Stroud than you might be, but part of why I like him is just the potential for this game to go back and forth. I like Joe Burrow a lot. It's great that he's healthier, but if you take out two of his top pass catchers, and
Yeah.
coincidentally for him, they're two of the best receivers in football,
Yeah.
it's tricky. So my main thought at this point is a Tank Dell Joe Mixon mini stack. I don't think I would regret that. I've been higher on Mixon than most, it seems like, all season. I would like this game. Like, I don't think that the Bengals will completely fall apart.
Yeah.
But Mixon probably get a few extra targets. They could probably still move the ball a little bit. What are your thoughts on this? Would the injuries to the receivers really just take you out of this game?
If one of them plays, and I think that, like, reading more into reports on Jamar Chase this week, I think he's probably going to play actually.
Okay.
So if we can get Burrow with Chase, sick. Like, that's fine. Like, it's very high salary, but like, I think that if Higgins can't go, I bet that Chase will. So I'm actually thinking right now one of them will play, and that to me is encouraging. If we look back to last year in the games, I think that the most relevant sample is the Bengals without Chase. So taking out their best player. Like, worst case scenario, they lose Chase if we assume they don't lose both. Burrow is still at 0.17 passing net expected points per dropback in that span. It's not typical Burrow, but it was like good still. Higgins had a 26% target share, 36% deep. Tyler Boyd still didn't do a whole lot. Like, I guess you could use Boyd if both guys are out. But like, if one of them plays, I don't think there's enough upside in Boyd to get to him, especially a salary 62. Like, that's not low
Yeah.
for him. So if both are out, sure, whatever. I wouldn't use Burrow then as much, but like, I probably could use Boyd. But I think that Burrow's good enough, and this matchup is good enough to use Burrow if one of them is out.
I agree with that.
Mhm.
It might bump Burrow out of my, like, he was my QB1, assuming both
Tier of
these
his
guys are
own,
healthy.
I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let's say there's one of them. He's probably more in the tier of Herbert and Goff.
Sure.
And I think based on reports I'm seeing for Kyler Murray, just probably going to bump him to the top of that tier. I don't think he's in a tier of his own necessarily, but so that's what, if you include Stroud, 5 quarterbacks,
And I like
even if you get,
Lawrence, so that's 6 for me.
but like it's sort of tier 1
Yeah.
borderline. You got 4 to 6 quarterbacks. Like, that's tough.
It's better than one or none.
Is it? Is
Yes.
it? If we had Burrow with both guys healthy all week,
Well,
and we
like,
had one.
we have had slates this year where there were 0 quarterbacks as good as Burrow, like, is in this
Sure,
situation.
yeah,
So,
I get you.
like, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
With Stroud, again, for me, it's mainly hesitation. Like, his salary went up. People will be there because point chasing is very relevant for DFS. Outdoors, facing a good defensive coordinator. I didn't say good defense because they have not been a good defense this year, but I trust Lou Anarumo a lot. So I am very receptive to Stroud. And if I open up roster A projections on Sunday and see that he's not actually that high, I would get to him. I'd be fine with that. But like, I think there are a couple red flags in his profile that concern me. Now, the reason the case for Stroud, and I'll let you give your case as well. Case for Stroud is that they're currently the 3rd ranked passing offense in schedule adjusted efficiency. When you're facing a non-elite defense in a game with a very high total and tight enough spread, why the F would I not use him? So like, that's kind of, I think, the counterpoint. What are you thinking about Stroud this week?
He's been overperforming, which is not going to surprise anyone, but completion rate over expectation of plus 12.2% last week. It was minus 4.2% the week before, though. So like, there is some like volatility still here, but as you mentioned, non-elite defense. Cincinnati's 31st in passing success rate allowed, and they're last in passing ADOT allowed, by which I mean they are allowing the highest average depth of target. He will sling it. He will sling it to multiple names. I think that if you are telling me there's Burrow with 1 or 0 of his top receivers healthy, maybe you're not completely sold on Kyler. I think you'd have I like Jared Goff, but he's a pocket passer.
Sure.
Herbert's not 100%. I don't think you could tell me that like Stroud's not in that conversation. I think that's basically where I'm coming from.
That's very fair. And you mentioned the high A dot. So let's talk about the receivers here. Nico Collins is a calf injury, limited in practice on Wednesday. I think that kind of helps explain maybe why he's tailed off a little bit here recently, but also because Tank Dell is very good at football. Tank Dell's salary this week, $6,400. He had a huge game last week. And honestly, I think with Dell, the big reason I'm drawn to him, like I know it's a caricature of myself to say he gets red zone rushing attempts, but he does. And he's had multiple rushing attempts in I think 4 consecutive games. So Dell, Brandon, let's assume he's popular this week. I'm still good with him at 64. What about you?
Yeah, it's a higher floor type of play. I know we don't use the word floor, but look, receivers solid to really good. I wouldn't say it's like phenomenal in the 6,000 range. There have been weeks where I'm like, I'll play any of these guys.
Yeah.
Dell though stands out. He's in the Debo Samuel mode where like he'll get carries and he'll get like bunny targets, but he'll also get downfield work. So like the average target depth is hard to sort of factor in with him. But he rates out really well in my model, which accounts for that better because Debo forced me to figure that out. I know he's coming off of a multi-touchdown game, but hasn't really like scored at a really, really high rate all season. So, that's why there are games where he may like has single digits, but I think Dell in this game environment is really intriguing. But if you tell me that the Bengals don't have as much life, maybe I'll lower myself on them. But this whole slate's like game stack dependent.
I think that like if you want to reduce the roster rate on Stroud, like the effective roster rate, just pivot to Nico instead. His salary is only $500 higher. He is banged up, so it depends on injury reports throughout this week. But if he gets in a full practice at some point and we can feel good about him, like he's $500 higher. He's had some monster games. Like his 146-yard game came with Tank Dell starting. He had 168 against the Steelers too. So like he can have spike games. So both these guys have downsides. So I think for this week at least, if I'm trying to reduce Stroud's roster rate, give me the guy with the lower roster rate as the stack, and that'd be Nico, most likely at 69. So I think that that's one way you could reduce the effective roster rate of CJ Stroud.
I'm fine with that, although I don't think that Stroud's going to be the quarterbacks don't really get prohibitively popular, so I'm not going to overthink that one. I like Dalton Schultz well enough too. So a lot of different ways to go here.
All right, kids, if you're watching, cover your eyes. Brandon, Devin Singletary, yay or nay? If we assume Pierce sits again.
No.
Earmuffs as well, kids. I didn't mean to say single digits. I said his full name, so sorry. Single digits. Yeah, probably not. Like, they're just so bad. Like, it's a fine matchup for running, but like, I think they're just as a team bad at running the football. They're getting, I think they're getting one more offensive lineman back this week. Like, they get one back every week because they had like 16 out. But like, yeah, he just stinks,
like yards per carry is not great, but I can calculate the yards per carry from last week off the top of my head. And the crazy thing is, on 13 carries, his expected rushing yards 42.4. So like he underperformed, but it wasn't like he was supposed to have anything phenomenal. So I don't know. I just think that even with the 74% snap rate, like he's been someone with the Bills playing 74% of the snaps, still doing the same thing. I think that's a very similar situation. So, kind of
better quarterback in Houston, though. Sorry,
it's kind of weird for him to be in almost the same position where we'll play a bunch of snaps, maybe get double-digit carries, but single-digit output.
As much as things may change, the more they stay the same. Let's move now to our third game in the bookmaker section for this week. That is the 49ers at the Jaguars, where right now the 49ers are 3-point favorites. Total in this game is 45.5. And the defenses here are very good, and we know that, but so are the offenses. 49ers getting Deebo Samuel back this week, potentially Trent Williams as well. Zay Jones, limited practice Wednesday, so pretty healthy offenses, all things considered. But Brandon, do the defenses here give you any pause with stacking this game?
So we were talking, I think the 49ers defense probably a little overrated in terms of what they've done this season. But as you pointed out, they have the talent to play better. And I don't think that like this is oh no, they're secretly like really, really bad. And this is something that we can take advantage of. I like this game overall, but these two teams in particular are typically hard to stack because there are multiple options.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite plays here, if I had to pick one, it would be Travis Etienne because the salary is more reasonable. His workload's been really good. He's one of my player picks this week. But my second play here would be Christian McCaffrey, and that's way too hard to make work. Like a run, and I'm good with running back stacks, but playing both just sort of takes the air out of the rest of your lineup. Again, I'm talking like I should probably just wind up playing McCaffrey, but even playing him by himself is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like if you're gonna play McCaffrey and you play like Trevor Lawrence to help offset some of that salary, you can build a lineup. I'm not saying it's like impossible, but let's say we get Charbonnet for sure.
Yeah.
Like, would you be trying to get to McCaffrey and like Trevor Lawrence? Like, do you like this game that much?
I would try to get to McCaffrey. I think that I would use Charbonnet in order to get off of Lawrence because part of the appeal of Lawrence is his salary.
Right.
Because like
I didn't know how much you liked Lawrence overall, so I wanted to ask that.
He's more as a way to get to the studs in other games. So I'd use Lawrence, probably pair him with Calvin Ridley at 67 and McCaffrey at 10.5. So game stack this one, but then get game stacks elsewhere too. What?
If you just showed me this box score, I would say this is Derek Carr.
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong in that regard. So, like, he hasn't done it yet. But then you look at the touchdown column and you see why. He has not had more than 2 touchdown passes this year. Now, does that mean he is incapable of touchdown passes? No. And that's why I'm okay with going to it. He hasn't done it yet this year, but we know he can. And I think that's enough to justify going to Lawrence at 71. Is he my favorite quarterback this week? No. But if I'm having trouble differentiating and all the other guys have like passive failure too, I'm okay taking the discount and going to Lawrence. What's your main hangout? Is it the lack of upside that he's shown this year? Because I think that'd be a justifiable like red flag for you.
I mean, at a certain point, like you got to do something.
Sure.
They're about league average in red zone rushing or passing rate, whatever, however you want to flip it. So like, I don't love that, but it's not like they're just super, super run heavy in the red zone. I think the matchup is probably a little bit better than people think, but the efficiency for Lawrence when you adjust for opponents has been exactly average. Yeah. And if I expect that this is sort of a top 10 level defense, I see the case for it, but he's not going to go out. I'm not going to go out of my way to like prioritize him.
Yeah, if I look at their early down efficiency, they're at 0.12 passing net expected points per dropback on early downs. League average is 0.07, but it gets boosted to 0.15 once you adjust for opponents. So like, does get a slight boost on early downs at least. And like the 49ers are the opposite, where like they faced some bad quarterback play. Their unadjusted number on early downs against the pass is 0.00, but when you adjust for schedule, it's 0.08. So they face kind of an easy path so far, quarterback. I don't think that means they're bad, especially with Chase Young being there now. But like, I think there is a path to Lawrence playing well, and for this salary, that's enough to at least get me somewhat interested there.
How many lineups do you need to build before you put in Lawrence? Let me put it that way:
4 or 5.
Just 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that would probably imply that you're having like
one different quarterback at every single lineup. Yes, it is.
That's what sucks about this slate.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the biggest downside of this slate. Let's talk about receiver. Deebo Samuel is back, and his salary is $7,000. Now, I think the salary on all the pass catchers in this game is great. Brandon Ayuk at 78. In the games that Deebo has played this year, the games that he and Deebo have both played together, Ayuk is at 93 or 94.5 yards from scrimmage per game in that span. So still really good output for him. 28% target share. Deebo, 19% target share, 25% of the deep targets, 64 yards from scrimmage per game. I think both those guys are really fun, and Ridley is fun too at 67. I think that Kirk's okay, but like there's some scariness there because he does operate a bit more in the middle of the field than Fred Warner. I always say this creates a black hole in the middle of the field for the 49ers. I know you're laughing because I say it a lot, but like
you do more PR for Fred Warner than anyone.
I am his agent. It's okay. And then Zay Jones, if he's back, could push Kirk to being just in 3 receiver sets. I don't think that'll happen because Zay is banged up and Kirk has been really good, but like that's something there. So I would say like I'm looking for a mid-range stack, a mid-range mini stack, a Debo or Ayuk with Ridley stack is really, really fun. Am I too high on the receivers in this game?
No, I like the receivers in this game. I don't like them enough to like want to play them actively.
Sure.
There's a chance that this is like prime mini stack territory. Also the Jaguars coming out of a bye and like they got Ridley some more targets leading into the bye, but maybe they figure things out because he was really good to start the season and then tailed off. So maybe they get that sorted. If I have like 7,000 on average for 2 receivers,
yeah,
like I like this game enough that I would strongly consider going there, especially if T is not 100%. But I'm again, I this probably sucks to hear, but like I don't actively want to play anyone in this game over other receivers. But I'm
I
probably
do
gonna
with
stack it.
Debo, like maybe not over T if he's fully healthy, but like everyone else, I would rank him above. I think
everyone else you would rank.
I'd rank T like Debo's number 2 for me in this range at receiver. If I assume T Higgins is okay, if there's no T Higgins, then Debo's probably 1 for me.
Is Olave in this range or no?
72, right? So
74.
Yeah, he's in that range.
Give me Olave there.
Okay, fair enough.
DK.
Oh, sorry, I forgot DK. DK is probably 1.
Hopkins.
Oh man. Okay.
I know.
I didn't pull up.
I know.
It's a good range, man. Like I think that like what it all comes down to, and like maybe this is why you're bumping up against this slate, is that I like a lot of mid-range players, but the players in the games I want to stack have high salaries. Is that why you're annoyed at this slate?
It's really hard to like have an Amon-Ra St. Brown like Eckler stack because there's not value. Like
sure,
you physically can't fill out a lineup if you're like, okay, I want one high salaried stack, but then let me pepper the mid range. Doesn't always work quite that way.
Sure.
And so it's really hard to again plant the flag in any particular players.
Unless you go Trevor Lawrence to save salary at 71, or we get Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, come on.
Kenneth Walker.
Hey, rest up.
Get healthy, sit in the couch for a week.
Yeah.
Get those bones good. No Kittle for you, right? Just want to check that.
Probably not. There are enough tight ends that I don't think I need to.
Yeah, I'm good. No thanks. Okay. Any final thoughts for you on the game stacks for this week?
Game stacks are going to decide my lineup. I don't know which game it's going to be. These are 3 prime candidates. Some of them are easier to stack than others, but many stacks of these games are something I want to get to. Just don't know exactly where I would land.
So let's talk about another game that could give us some value, and that is the Cardinals versus the Falcons. And Kyler Murray is back this week, Brandon. So you're going to talk about the Cardinals with Kyler Murray at quarterback and what that does for them, for Kyler, for the pass catchers here, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's never super easy to look at like a quarterback who hasn't played yet this season and kind of figure out what the efficiency difference might be. But long story short, through week 9, Arizona ranks 27th in overall adjusted offense according to numberFire's metrics. They're 29th in passing offense, a pretty respectable 7th in rushing offense once accounting for opponents faced. But clearly, there's room for growth. Last season, by my count, Arizona 10 full games with Kyler Murray under center. His EPA per dropback was minus 0.06 in those games. Not great, but without him, the rest of the Cardinals combined for a minus 0.31. So, and Murray, he's had flashes of some efficiency, but he's never really been like the most efficient player. He had 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, but other Cardinals QBs had 3 touchdowns and 10 picks, which is sick. Now the thing for Murray is like I would assume perception is that he likes to sling it downfield. It hasn't been the case for a while now. His ADOT was 6.7 yards. That was worse than the team average last year. So there might not be more downfield passing, but fewer sacks, just much better efficiency. Even if it's close to league average, we'll take that as a huge upgrade. Josh Dobbs this year was viable from an adjusted efficiency standpoint, but still below expectation. 5.9 yards per attempt. So I care about efficiency long term, but at a certain point, if the yardage isn't there, that matters for fantasy. So, just kind of, I think Dobbs was fine, but didn't lead to a whole lot or lead to enough. Now, Kyler's salary of 7,500 is very interesting right off the bat. I started to think about this a lot more, and it's what are the odds Murray's salary is this low again all season? It's probably going to go up this week after this week. Reports are that there are no expected limitations for his rushing, and that's a huge catalyst for quarterback upside. And on this slate, aren't a whole lot of rushing QBs. Some might say none other than Murray. So I like that. And he's got some easy stack candidates to help out with everything too. Marquise Brown, salary is 6,600. He played the first 6 games last season with Murray, but no DeAndre Hopkins. 26.3% target share, 42% air yard share, 4.3 downfield targets per game, which for me is 10 plus yards downfield, 10.7 overall targets per game. I like that. I'm not digging into the rest of the pass catchers or anything, but there's enough there for me to want to play Marquise Brown with Murray back. And the volume's been good for him recently. And over the past 2 weeks without Zach Ertz, Trey McBride is leading the team with a 33.9% target share. Brown's at 30.4% in that span. Again, it's a different QB, but I would not be surprised if Brown and McBride combined for a 50% target share this week, sort of on the low end, because who else are they going to throw it to? I'm not. If James Conner's back, I didn't really dig into Conner, but his workload was really good to start the season. If he's healthy, he might be the third running back to sort of, I don't want to flex a receiver this week. I'd rather flex a running back. If Conner is active and good to go, full by Friday, everything like that, he's probably in that conversation. I would ask you Conner or Bijan Robinson, but what are your thoughts here on the Cardinals? I think specifically Kyler Murray, because it seems like I'm higher on him than you are.
Yeah, I just worry about if the rushing will be there right away. I know they're generally expecting him to, and he was not rushed back. He's been practicing for 3 weeks now. They used the full 21-day window to get him ramped up. He was full in week 2 of practice, not week 2 of the season, but his second week of practice, he was practicing in full. So I just don't they don't have a lot of incentive to run him when if he gets hurt, they're on the hook for a lot of guaranteed money. So I don't think there will be design runs. Could he scramble? Sure. But I don't think we'll see a lot of design runs because of the contract situation, because I think they'll probably want to trade him if they get a high enough pick in the draft. So I don't think there'll be incentive to do design runs with him. And that's my concern.
Wouldn't you want to run him though at the same time?
No.
You don't want him to have him just drop back and pass because he's not an efficient passer.
Yeah, I would just I think the downsides of the injury are bigger.
Tell him to slide but keep running.
They're in a really bad spot if he gets hurt. So that'd be my concern. But I still think he's in play despite that. Let me be clear. I still because Atlanta sucks.
Yeah.
They're a really bad defense. So against the pass, they're pretty good against the rush. Against the pass, they are, I guess, 22nd by numberFire's metrics, so not as terrible as I thought, but they got beat by Josh Dobbs last week, man. He wasn't efficient through the air, but would you expect him to be? So Kyler's in play. I think the way I'd want to get exposure to Kyler, though, is via Trey McBride at 51. I think that he is the best tight end play on the slate, correct? Yeah? Cool. All right, cool.
He's the guy that I feel good with.
You asked me before about guy I put in my lineup first. It might be him.
It's him.
Yeah. So McBride, I can get exposure to Kyler via McBride. I can potentially get it via Brown, but I think I prefer other guys in that range a bit more. So it's really just about I don't expect any design runs for Kyler, and that does ding his appeal a bit, but I'm not out on him. I'm just a bit worried about that part of it.
I would buy that more if there were Mahomes and Allen on the slate.
Sure.
There's not.
Sure.
Murray could put up 27 and like be the guy, and his salary like accounts for the fact that would be a really good return. So
I think he's QB5 for me. No, I don't know. He's in that discussion with that tier. Like there are 5 dudes in that tier, and then
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know.
But I would say I do like him enough to consider him, but I would need more like 10 lineups to get there versus for Lawrence it was like 5.
Okay, he might be the guy I play in my main lineup.
So I'll use your phrase on you. I would not talk you out of that. I think it's fine to use him. Runbacks here. Where are you on Bijan?
I
I know we
think
talked about it before, but
he's an other to consider for me.
Okay.
The snap rate's fine, I get it, but like this team's being cute with what they're doing. They're like, oh, he's making an impact away from it. It's like, give me a break with this. Like, get him the ball. Who else you getting the ball to?
I mean, Algier was good in week 1, but he has not been good since then.
And so. I don't want to play players based on the assumption that things will get better. Like,
I don't think they'll get better. I think that like status quo, he can pay off at 66 if he gets a like if he breaks a touchdown. I think he's good enough to do that against this defense. Sure. That's why I'm okay with it. So I don't need status quo to break for him.
Okay, I don't want to play someone who in my main lineup
is dependent on a long.
If he breaks one,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think that's totally okay. I just don't think people will be here, and this matchup is amazing. So that's part of why I want to be there. Let's move now to my first trend and talk about the Titans with Will Levis. He's going to be their starter going forward. We talked last week about the Bucs-Texans game in large part because the Bucs defense kind of stinks against the pass. Total here is 38.5, but both these pass defenses actually stink. So I think at least mini stacks are at least in play here. So want to dig into the Titans with Will Levis starting and see whether we can get to DeAndre Hopkins and others on this team. Across the 2 games, Levis is at negative 0.02 passing net expected points per dropback. That's basically right in line with Ryan Tannehill, who was at negative 0.03 before his injury. They've been a tiny bit more run heavy. Their season-long pass rate over expectation is negative 4.0%, according to NFL Faster. They're at negative 5.2% and negative 4.6% in Levis's 2 starts. So tiny bit more run heavy, but basically a wash. The main difference between the two is that Levis's ADOT is 10.8, whereas Tannehill was at 9.2. And 9.2 is not a bad number. That's a decent number. But Levis has been above that. They've averaged 11 deep targets per game. For me, that's 16 plus yards downfield. 11 deep targets per game is nuts. He is letting it rip. A lot of those are to DeAndre Hopkins. He's with 3.5 deep targets per game with a 27% overall target share. And that's while playing with Treylon Burks, who is expected to miss this game. In 3 games with no Burks, Hopkins' target share is 27.5%, average 74.3 yards per game. So for $7,100, he's fully in play. Chigakonkwo, 20% target share in those games. He's at 15.6% in 2 games with Levis, so should get a boost here with Burks likely out. Okonkwo has not had more than 35 yards in a game yet this year, but I do think that's within his range of outcomes. So I prefer Hopkins, but not opposed to Chig at $4,800. So I don't mind getting exposure here via Hopkins or Okonkwo, and we can always run it back with Evans or Godwin, despite last week's relative disappointment. So is that getting too high on a game with a low total when it's actually a decent slate, or do you agree that Hopkins is very much in play at 71?
So you said Chig Okonkwo hasn't had more than 35 yards in a game. Did he have a catch shorter than 35 yards last season?
Probably not.
Like every he was like AJ Brown reincarnated in the Titans offense, where he'd have 4 catches for like 135 and 2 touchdowns. I don't know. I'm trying to see the case here. I'm trying. Like Levis's success rate's really low, and I'm worried that it's just a lot of explosive plays. I mean, what did Hopkins have? Like, was it three touchdowns on 4 catches?
Yeah, and 2 of them were kind of weird.
Like, I see the case for it. Again, I'm not going to talk you out of it, but I think I got to build too many lineups to get to like the Titans here.
Yeah, I think that like Hopkins, like, so I like Metcalf a lot, but if I'm filling out like a cash game lineup, I'd probably prefer Hopkins over him.
Yeah, there's something to be said for just going with guys who have incredible target shares, even if
Right.
the offense isn't perfect,
Right.
and even if it's not the most high volume passing offense.
Right.
We've targeted a lot of names like that over the years, and it's like it's a fine process. It seems like this team is begrudgingly or hesitant to like really commit to Levis. The comments are like, "We'll see what he can do," basically.
Yeah.
Um, I just don't love that, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'd probably rather. I think maybe if I was more into the other side of the ball here, but
Sure.
I like Rashad White well enough, so maybe like Hopkins and White is a mini stack, but I don't really love the matchup for him. It's just more of a workload thing.
Yeah. I don't think I'll get to him with Jones at 68 and with Bijan right there, James Conner potentially there.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll get to White realistically, but I can see Hopkins as a one off, especially like a cashy format. I think that he's pretty in play for that personally.
So you asked me this before,
Mhm.
or I asked you this. We'll throw Mike Evans in because it's the same game. Evans or Hopkins?
Hopkins,
Olave or Hopkins?
Hopkins,
Metcalf or Hopkins?
Metcalf in tournaments, Hopkins in cash games.
Okay.
Do you
That's
disagree
fair.
with any of those or no? All
I'd
of
probably
them?
go Hopkins over Evans.
Yeah.
I'd probably go Metcalf and I like Olave again this week, but
Okay, cool. Let's move now to talk about that big divisional match between the Browns and the Ravens. Low total in this game, but it's Lamar Jackson, who is a running quarterback on a slate where, like you said, not a lot of those guys exist. So talk me through the Browns defense and how we should handle the Ravens against them this week.
yeah, the Browns defense is just so good at like everything and every metric. It's kind of absurd. This is a divisional rematch from Week 4. Baltimore won that one easily, but Cleveland started Dorian Thompson Robinson, so it's a bit different. We also know that Lamar Jackson just has upside in any situation, and I don't know if it was that week or another week, but I remember early on in the season, I said, like, if we can get Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews at guaranteed like low popularity, even in bad matchups, it's probably worth a shot. And it worked out that week. I think it might have been week 2. I can't quite remember, but we're getting a similar situation this week. Now, Cleveland, according to numberFire's metrics and probably every other metric, they're first in overall adjusted defense, first in adjusted pass defense, fourth in adjusted rush defense. If you get a little bit more granular and look like position by position, especially for Jackson, his sake, they're second in rushing yards over expectation per carry allowed to quarterbacks, third in rushing success rate allowed. Of course, it always depends on who you're facing with quarterback splits like that, but it's not like they've been really good against running backs, but can kind of give up some yards to quarterbacks, anything like that. As far as the running back matchups go, first in adjusted rushing FanDuel points per carry to running backs, fourth on a per target basis out of the backfield to both running backs and receivers. If you kind of had to find a weak spot, at least according to the metrics I use, would be against tight ends where they're 13th in player level adjusted FanDuel points per target. That's kind of fluky though. And the thing is here, they faced 28 tight end targets according to next gen stats. That's 10 fewer targets than any other team. And they're letting up 0.67 yards per route run to tight ends. That's tough. Now, since 2018, Lamar Jackson has underperformed projections by about a point against divisional opponents overall, according to numberFire's projections. He's at a plus 0.5 outside of the division. The splits there in terms of actual FanDuel points 20.7 per game against non divisional opponents, 17.2 versus divisional opponents. That doesn't account for how good defenses were whenever he played them. It's just sort of a general trend. And 17.2 is not bad, especially on this slate, but he's coming off of 2 games with fewer than a dozen FanDuel points, which you don't love. His passing efficiency, though, in these games is a bit down, but he still runs a lot. So, like, I mean, there's a case for an upside week for him. Now, since 2018 and against top 6 adjusted pass defenses, Lamar has averaged 18.2 FanDuel points, 160 passing yards, but almost 11 carries for 57 rushing yards and 0.67 rushing touchdowns per game. Again, coming off of a good game against them in week 4, but that came from 2 rushing touchdowns and just 186 passing yards. Easily could have been another down game from him. Like, this team can run the ball inside the 10 a ton, but it doesn't always go to Jackson. Jackson himself has a solid, red zone workload himself, but it's a little bit tricky. He might not throw for touchdowns. The risk is like the floor. Again, we don't use the word floor. The floor is under 12 FanDuel points again, and they could still win. The ceiling is like 30 plus still because it's within his range of outcomes, even in a matchup like this. I can't go out of my way to build around Jackson. Andrew's salary really doesn't leave you a whole lot of room for error on a slate where there's no value to begin with. So it's not like, oh, well, I have a salary just to get to Mark Andrews. And I love Zay, but I don't. I think maybe I need a week off of Zay. So what are your thoughts on this offense? And do you like anyone from the Browns?
I think there are 2 paths to failure for Lamar. One is that the defense is just very good and he doesn't play well there. The second one is that they just don't need to score because Cleveland does nothing offensively because Deshaun sucks. So like Deshaun sucks facing a very good defense.
Yeah.
Like per my model, this is the second largest spread on the slate behind Dallas. I have it as a larger spread than the Houston Cincy game, and that could get tighter if T Higgins can't go. So honestly, to me, like I don't feel the need to force it. Like it's good to look into it because like you said, like in general, our inclination should be to play Lamar and Mark Andrews when they're at low roster rates. I just don't think this is the week to do so. Next week, love to be back, but for this week, I'm good holding out personally.
If it burns me, it burns me.
Correct.
If I
die. You know, gotta live life that way.
What's the worst that could happen?
The worst that could happen is what happened in week 4. But I think I might have used, I don't know, whatever. I think I used in that week, but still, regardless. Let's talk about my second trend here and talk about Seattle facing Washington this week. They just traded Chase Young and Montez Sweat. They ranked 27th in schedule adjusted pass defense while having all those guys for all but 1 game. So we can use guys against them. But Seattle's passing offense has been underwhelming. They're just 14th thus far in schedule adjusted passing efficiency. So not a needle mover as of now. And a lot of that's been due to 3rd and 4th down, which I think is kind of fluky personally, because the Seahawks rank 31st in late down success rate this year. They do improve to 27th once you adjust for schedule though. And Washington has been middle of the pack there. So they should trend down without 2 pass rushers. On early downs, Seattle's been awesome, like weirdly good. They rank 3rd in schedule adjusted early down passing efficiency, trailing just the 49ers and the Dolphins. Their overall pass rate over expectation is around league average, and teams throw against the Commanders at a league average rate on early down. So volume should be fine here. Not great, but fine. The Commanders offense, fine enough where they may not get totally blown out. So I do think Seattle's passing offense is in play here. Look at the games that Metcalf has played. Tyler Lockett leads with a 24% target share, Metcalf at 23%. Both guys have a 38% deep target share, and both guys have a red zone target share above 28%, with Metcalf at 39%. Jackson Smith and Jigbo, and both guys been healthy, hasn't done a ton, and now he might be banged up. So I actually like DK a lot at 73. I'm fine settling for Lockett if I can't quite get there. I'm receptive to Geno Smith. I do think he loses some appeal with viable game stacks elsewhere, but also like maybe this one isn't that bad. I'm fine running it back with the pass catchers if Curtis Samuel doesn't play. If Samuel does play, I might just go with like the Seahawks by themselves. McLaurin to be my favorite of the bunch if there's no Samuel. But what's your view of this game overall? And then what's your view of Metcalf and Lockett specifically?
Overall, I like the game. It's Washington just always difficult, and that lowers me on stacks because I want to. My default is to stack games. They have enough mouths to feed where it gets a little tricky. But I like Metcalf and Lockett a ton this week, to the point that if I'm playing a value QB, I might just go Geno instead of Lawrence.
Okay.
But it's going to depend on the stacks, and Metcalf hasn't really done a ton. He's underperforming.
How does he have 2 touchdowns with that red zone share? Like that's not That's not sustainable. Like he's going to have a 2-touchdown game soon, I think.
Yeah. Like Lockett and Metcalf. So on passes traveling at least 10 yards downfield, league average for receivers is a 51% catch rate. Lockett's at 45%, Metcalf's at 47%. So it's a little bit below average. You would expect these guys to be good long term on downfield numbers like that. So like there's a lot that points to potential regression for these two in particular. I think they stand out. Not as like bona fide superstar level plays relative to the rest of the guys near them, but they stand out to me a little bit more just because the target shares are generally safe and they're both talented. Gino, though, he's been fine, hasn't been bad. And it's like, I think at a certain point, if you're fine and then you get the right type of matchup, there's a lot of passing from the other team. I'm fine with that. I could see like the Jaguars and 49ers game being a little bit uglier than this one.
Yeah.
Well, I guess uglier as in like it's gonna be it's two really good teams, but like this game could be fun ugly for like fantasy purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that, just given how good those defenses are, and these defenses are not that. So I think that does make sense. I still prefer that game, but I understand the appeal as well. Weather for this week, nothing too bad. It's actually those two games. The wind in the 49ers Jags game of 10 miles per hour, that's not a concern for me, but if it goes higher, it would be. And then there are some rain in Commanders and Seahawks. It's been the rain odds have been decreasing as the week has gone along, but there is potential rain in the forecast there for that one. So check back on the weather for those later. Let's now go position by position, break down our top plays on FanDuel for this week. Starting off at quarterback, Brandon, who are you targeting in week number 10?
I had Joe Burrow. I'm going to stay with Joe Burrow, assuming that at least Jamar Chase or T. Higgins plays. If not, probably CJ Stroud is where I'd go for my second love. But like, I don't want to move away from Burrow and assume that, because then I'll lower myself on him and then he gets healthy, receivers, and then I got to rearrange everything. But he's looking healthier. I mentioned this toward the top of the show, but 1.6 scrambles per game over his past 5, according to Next Gen Stats. No scrambles at all in his first 3. He just like looks healthy. He's still getting like the calf treatment on the sideline, but overall, things are trending up. Over his past 4 games, 283 passing yards per game, 2.5 passing touchdowns, 0.13 EPA per drop back, 0.20 if you adjust for opponents faced. I love that. Success rate's great. Matchup is really promising. Houston is last in completion rate over expectation allowed. So I think a ceiling game is in play so long as he gets some semblance of top tier pass catchers. But of course, my second love, who might be my first love if Burrow, I need to downgrade him, is Kyler Murray, just for the sake of, I think there is a path to upside, especially at a salary of 7,500. The Falcons are 25th in pressure rate, 22nd in adjusted pass defense. They have a good rush defense, so you want Kyler to run. And apparently, according to the offensive coordinator, like there are no limitations on him. He's been healthy. It's just sort of been a matter of time. I think I can't like if Murray goes out, throws 25 times, runs 3 times, I still don't think it's a bad process play to play a running quarterback in a good matchup at this salary who should be fully healthy.
And it is a tight spread. It is a decently high total at 43.5. That total has been rising, so there are more marks in Kyler's favor. I want to be conservative with him given the concern around his contract, but I still think he's very much in play. I'm going to go Joe Burrow too. I'm going to stick with him. Just going to think that one of those guys will play. And if we assume that Burrow, to me, whether it's Higgins or Chase playing, I don't care. I think he's still the top guy regardless. He's at 0.23 passing net expected points per dropback in the past 4 games, where his calf has looked better, starting with that 49ers game where he's a bit more mobile. He's run 11 times the past 2 games, and the Texans ranked 25th against the pass this year. Their injury report is half their roster. Like half their guys almost are on the injury report right now, and a lot of them are on defense. In the secondary linebacker, I think they're going to get Derek Stingley Jr. back this week, which would be a good upgrade for their secondary, but I still think that Burrow at 82 just feels a bit low given the upside he can possess. My number 2 love, I'm going to stick with Trevor Lawrence. He's $7,100. He has not had 20 FanDuel points yet this year, but I think he's like looked good, and now may get Zay Jones back. That knee is a week healthier. They didn't have their left tackle for the first couple of games, so there were some question marks along the offensive line. Lawrence has been running a bit more this year, which is interesting. He's had 5+ rush attempts in 5 games this year. 49ers ranked 10th against the pass, but teams throw against them at a very, very high rate. I think it's the second highest in the league behind the Eagles. So this could be a sneaky fun game for stacks due to pass rate. I think that if you look at opposing early down pass rates, it is highest for the Eagles, second highest, and third highest is the 49ers and Jags. So we see a lot of pass attempts that could juice up the play volume in this game. That could help both sides level out. So I'm going to stick with Lawrence as my number 2 love at quarterback. Running back, what you looking at there?
Would you do a Lawrence versus Kyler bet? I know the salaries are different, so don't yell at me there.
I think it's a consideration. I'm not going to take it, but I think it's close enough to get, like, the reasons why I'm hesitant are matchup and indoors for Kyler.
Yeah.
But
the two things I really want this week, well, 3, I guess. Jamar and T just get healthy. And
now, whereas Kenneth Walker get healthy over the weekend, they need to be healthy right now.
Yeah. And that's the second thing. Yeah. At running back, I like Travis Etienne in that game. I think he's my preferred route. Although if I play Etienne, I'm probably honestly more likely to play Trevor Lawrence in a lineup just to get access to that entire offense.
Sure.
Salary of 84, I think will probably keep enough people away in the matchup. But his workload's great. His low water snap rate is 72% this year, coming off of a bye. Again, 49ers defense, the metrics wise, not super daunting. 23rd in rushing success rate, 21st in adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to running backs. ETN's average over 106 scrimmage yards a game. Second only to Christian McCaffrey in the league. 32% overall red zone opportunity share. If this game is good, I think ETN is part of that. So I like him, and I think the salary keeps enough people away. Speaking of salary and maybe keep people away, Tony Pollard, I don't see how this can be a bad game for Pollard, because football games don't work where like 3 minutes in, it's a blowout. And so he just gets pulled. He's going to probably play at least 3 quarters. Maybe not, but I think. And they got to get this guy going, right? CeeDee Lamb's been all the rage the past 2 weeks. Get Tony Pollard something, but it's also not just an assumption here. And I would hate that argument otherwise, but like he's still averaging 83 yards per game, which isn't that bad compared to like the full main slate at running back. 37% overall red zone opportunity share. It is a like mid-level at best matchup for a team that's just reeling. And he hasn't scored. Like eventually he's going to score more. Like he's on the field, he's getting red zone work. That's the kind of stuff I want to buy in on. I know the salary's already up, but I'm fine. My third love, who's probably my favorite running back of the week, which is weird, is Aaron Jones, especially at the salary of 6,800, coming off of a season high snap rate of 57%, which sucks, but that I'm like talking myself into that being my favorite play. But
what did he do when he was on the field?
But like, despite share and work, he's still got a 37% overall red zone share. Like, you want to say like Bijan has a path to, like, if he breaks one, like Aaron Jones has a path by being efficient on his touches and like having a good overall role. So I'd go Jones over Bijan. But yeah, I think we both like Aaron Jones a lot this week.
I would go Jones over Bijan too, but again, it's a porque no los dos situation for me personally. I'll talk about both those guys in a second, but first, Austin Eckler is going to be my top guy in the stud range for this week. So yeah, he looked bad on Monday, and it drove me nuts. He had 3 drops there. That's also pretty random. Like, you don't expect that to continue with Eckler, given that he is a good NFL player. He's had 120 plus yards in scrimmage twice already this year. So last year, a lot of yardage concerns. This year, not as much. And we know the touchdown equity is very much there. Like, he had a touchdown called back 2 separate times on Monday, and they still gave it to him once again. So I feel like we got to go Eckler at $9,000 as a top play for this week. You talked about Aaron Jones. I like Jones a lot as well. He is my number 2 love for this week. Finally got a spike in his usage. He had 20 carries. He had 6 targets. He had 99 yards in scrimmage. You talk about the red zone stuff overall, but he had 6 out of 9 red zone chances in that game specifically. So they got him a ton of work near the goal line. He is facing the Steelers, who just got Cameron Hayward back, and that's a big difference maker for their rush defense. But both the 49ers and the Titans had decent efficiency on the ground in the 2 games that Hayward has played so far this year. So it does definitely positively help them. But it's Aaron Jones at $6,800 facing a defense that's pretty good, but not one we necessarily need to avoid all players against. And it's a slate where we got to say salary. So Aaron Jones, to me, is a priority across all positions for week number 10. Let me talk about Bijan now. And I know it's been bad, but his salary accounts for that. His salary is $6,600, and he fits well with game stacks. So I want to go Trey McBride. A Trey McBride Bijan stack moves the needle a lot in terms of saving salary. And I know recently the game log's been bad for Bijan, but like, what he did earlier on this year still matters. And what he did is he had 130 plus yards in scrimmage twice, and that allowed him to score. Let me pull it up here so I can have the actual numbers. He had games this year where with no touchdowns, he scored 19.2 and 16.2 FanDuel points. And it's not as if his odds of scoring are 0. Like, he has a non-zero chance of scoring. So you could get 22, 25 points out of a guy for $6,600. That's pretty good. So he works for game stacks. He can get you decent points with no touchdowns. I think that's enough where we need to get to him at $6,600. Wide receiver, what you looking at there?
Sorry, quickly. If we get James Conner full, do you like him more than Bijan? Full by Friday? Or would you consider like Aaron Jones, Bijan, Conner as like a default kind of route?
That's not bad. I would consider all 3. I would say that he's in the Bijan tier. I would still put Jones above him, but I'd say he's probably a hair above Bijan. I actually would probably want him full on Thursday too, honestly. If he's full on Thursday, Friday, I would go Conner over Bijan. If he is only full on Friday, then I'll probably would go Bijan over him.
Okay, watch after all this. We're gonna get Conner full and like Charbonnet, and like the whole slate changes with how we've been talking.
If we get Charbonnet, just use Charbonnet.
Yeah, and then moving into receiver, I had T. Higgins, but I think we made the case for him, but we don't know if he's going to play. If we get that level of value, even if we get Conner, like I like Bijan well enough, especially because I'm going to play the other side of the ball a lot. That would let me get to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I love. He's got 11.1. I don't have full notes on this because I'm pivoting here, but 11.1 targets per game in his healthy games. We know that he is the focal point of this team. They can be run heavy. Getting Montgomery back could hurt that a bit. But he runs almost every route. He's got good red zone, good downfield work. He just is honestly probably like my favorite receiver in football, which is not anything like baked in. I mean, I love
best quarterback in football too,
Justin Jefferson. But like, give me access to him in this game, and I'm there. So that's a pivot away from T in case T doesn't go. But otherwise, I like Tyler Lockett a lot. Would prefer Metcalf, but a couple $100 here and there goes a long way this week. And unless we get that mega value with Charbonnet, but 28% target share over the past 2 games. Even with Jackson Smith and Jigba's role increased, if he's not good to go, like that obviously helps. But I remember asking questions early on if we were worried about their target, like there as in Lockett and Metcalf's target share with JSN getting a little more involved. Hasn't really been the case, even with his role improving. Overall in the season, Lockett has a 24% target share for 7.1 per game, just over 50 yards per game, but a good ADOT of 11.7 yards. And I had some notes on Higgins, but looking at downfield work, I already mentioned this, like just underperforming, but Geno Smith's been good on passes traveling 10 plus yards downfield, just coincidentally not to Lockett and Metcalf right now. So like kind of a regression play. And Washington is 30th in passing average depth of target allowed and 23rd in yards per target allowed on downfield passes. that's all I need for Lockett this week. Third love is Tank Dell. Really fun role for him. 1.3 carries per game, which is third among all main slate receivers, but up to 2.3 per game since week 4, which is a pretty sizable sample now. Those are high leverage looks in the red zone too, pretty often. 24.2% target share, and 40.6% air yard share in 2 post-bye games. I always like post-bye games as a sample, just as teams kind of get things figured out, but especially for younger players. So Dell at 64. I know we said McBride's probably the guy we're going to lock in. Dell's probably pretty close to that.
Sure.
For my main lineups.
That's fair. I think that's totally viable. My first level receiver is DeAndre Hopkins. Salary again, $7,100. And we've seen that he's capable of big games, and not just with Levis and those fluky downfield throws, but also he had like 140 yards against the Colts in a game. So he can still do that, and I think that's pretty encouraging. He's had 120 plus yards twice this year. The Bucs are ranked 29th against the pass based on numberFire's metrics, second against the rush, so should funnel a bit more volume towards the pass, and he has gotten really good work without Treylon Burks. So I think especially for a cashy type format, DeAndre Hopkins tough to turn down. I had T. Higgins number 2. Again, concerns about the hamstring there, so I do still like T if he plays. So would note that if he gets into full practice on Friday, love T. Higgins, but as One-Eyed Jack Productions remind us, it's just play Debo, baby. $7,000 for Debo Samuel. Great timing on that comment, by the way, on the YouTube page. But Debo Samuel hasn't done a ton in the games that he and Ayuk have played so far this year, but he hasn't been healthy. He had that initial shoulder injury, I think, back in week 4. But before that, he had a couple of games with 18-plus FanDuel points, one without Ayuk, so keep that in mind. But he's been solid still. His salary is $7,000. It's a game where we should see a decent amount of passing volume on both sides, and both these offenses are very fun. So I want to invest in this offense when I can, and I can this week with Debo Samuel's salary being $7,000. I would say Ayuk is a good play too, so don't cross him off. But I prefer Debo given the salary and the fact that I just want to use Debo because we got to. I also have Tank Dell as my third guy for this week. If we include the full games as a starter, so a bit of a larger sample, he has a 22% overall target share, 32% deep, and 9% in the red zone. Now, that 9% in the red zone is not big, but he has 2 red zone rush attempts in his past 4 games, and he has multiple rush attempts overall in 4 consecutive games. Now, that's fine for the points, but to me, it's an indicator that they want the ball in his hands. He's still returning punts, even though I wouldn't personally, just because I kind of want to keep him healthy, but they want the ball in his hands, and that matters to me. So Tank Dell at $6,400, I agree, he might be one of the top guys you put in your lineup, one of the first guys you plug in, because the salary and production are so good. The game is so good. I like all of that. Tight end, not a bad week for this position. So what you got there?
Not bad, but I think there's one guy who really stands out. That's Trey McBride. And I think the second name is pretty obvious because he's player pick for both of us, but Sam Laporta, salary 6,500 in that game against the Chargers. 23% target share since a week 3 breakout, 7.8 targets, almost 54 yards per game. That's 5th among main slate tight ends. And the Chargers are lighting up a top 8 catch rate over expectation to tight ends. I like that stat for tight ends. And then Trey McBride, you really have to talk me out of him. Popularity is one thing, but that's not enough of a conversation for me to move away. And the Falcons are allowing a league high 23.6% target per route rate to tight ends. I think this deep into the season, that stuff matters, and just in terms of how a defense works and operates. He has a 34% target share, 42% air yard share in 2 games without Zach Ertz.
Yeah, he's pretty good. I think that McBride is arguably again the best play on the slate. So he's my number 2 love just because it's based on salary, but let's talk about him first, just to kind of, add on to what you said. He's been relevant even with Josh Dobbs, and now gets Kyler Murray. And we can disparage Kyler Murray all we want, but he's an upgrade for this entire offense. He had a 34% target share in the 2 games that Ertz, 39% in the 1 game Michael Wilson played, because Wilson could be back this week. So not a huge impact on McBride there. They're indoors facing a bad defense. I need to save salary somewhere. I think this is probably my preferred place to do so. So I do like McBride a lot. I got Laporta as my other option too, and I'm going to stick with that. I thought about Hawkinson, but what we talk about at tight end is tying your tight ends to good games. And the Bengals threw touchdowns to every tight end last week, but like I don't want to use Irv Smith. Tanner Hudson's awesome, but like I don't want to use him in DFS. I don't want to use Schultz as a ton, I guess. I don't want to use Kittle this week. Don't want to use Ingram. Laporte is like the guy. If you're looking at game stacks for tight end, 22% target sharing games of the Amon-Ra St. Brown, 26% red zone share. I'm just going to go there. So Laporta also my top guy at tight end. Well, top guy in the high salary range, but McBride top guy, all things considered. What about defense? What you got there?
I really hate defense this week. Not a lot of $3,000 defenses to consider, but I'll go with the Buccaneers. I know you're big Will Levis guy now.
I'm big on the Bucs defense too. No, I'm not don't do this.
But 4,000 against the Titans. They're not a great pass defense. They're 29th according to numberFire, but top 2 run defense. Look, like I get the case for Levis, like having potential, having a ceiling enough to like want to play DeAndre Hopkins. I get that, but it doesn't sound like the most ringing endorsement to me that this team is going with Levis. Mike Vrabel's not super into it. And Levis passing success rate, 36.5% according to Next Gen Stats. Team is averaging 38.5% this year, so it's a downgrade from that. And the league average is 46.1%. So like there might be some splash plays, but I think there's probably going to be enough like sacks and turnovers that keeps this defense relevant.
Will Levis loves sacks and turnovers. Like, that's fine. I can use Hopkins and still like the Tampa Bay defense. Like I had the Vikings my top defense, but like I always list teams I don't mind after that. And the Bucs were the first one I listed. So despite liking Hopkins, I think the Tampa Bay defense is very much in play. My top one though is the Vikings. They are slight dogs against the Saints, but this defense is playing pretty well. They're a blitz heavy team, which can lead to upside. I think that's a positive as well. $3,700. I need savings somewhere. And again, I'm okay getting it via defense. I don't mind the Saints on the opposing side of this game at 42. I think that they're pretty in play as well against Josh Dobbs and the Vikings that, people buy into the fairy tale. We can exploit that. I don't mind either side of the Lions Chargers game either, just because there should be a lot of play volume in that game, which is good for defenses. I think the Steelers are in play, taking on the Packers and Jordan Love. I think the Seahawks are in play at 45 against the Commanders. Like that's getting up there. Ravens are 46, which is not bad given they're facing one of the worst quarterbacks in football recently. So I think that, there aren't any like low salary defenses, but there are enough that I can like be okay with.
Will you play any Cowboys defense this week?
What is it? 52? No, absolutely not.
Even if we get Charbonnet?
I don't care.
Okay.
I'm not spending my savings there.
Okay. It's something we never, ever talk about.
Don't
care.
I
just wanted to ask.
Nope. They can be in the optimal. They can score 30 points, and I'd rather die on that hill than win money. So no, I'm not doing it. Thank you for asking, but no. Right. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop for today?
I know we talked a lot about a lot of plays, and we're in on a lot of plays. We're half in, half out on a lot of plays. This week, hand build your lineups and base it off of the stacks that you like. Yeah. If you play Joe Burrow, stack that game, find mini stacks of other games. It's just not a week where there's like obvious one-off plays. I don't see it that way.
You hit the nail on the head. Like, base your quarterback on which game you like most. Which game do you like most? Cool. Use a quarterback in that game. Like that's just the way I would do it for this week. And I think that's fine. I like that from a stylistic perspective for DFS. So find the game you like first and allow that to dictate which quarterback you want to use. Be reactive to injury news on Higgins, Chase, Walker, et cetera, and just kind of use that to guide where you want to go for this week. But hopefully we laid out the areas we want to go as all that information comes in. Do not forget, check out the free roll over at FanDuel.com/research for this week. FanDuel.com/research. Check out the free roll for week number 10. Subscribe to the podcast, the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on FanDuel TV Plus or on the FanDuel YouTube page live at 10 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
Are you on Threads yet?
I don't know what that is.
It's the
Instagram
one
one
of Twitter. Yeah.
No.
So like when I tweet out the podcast, I say Brandon Gdula joined. I don't tag you. So like I feel like I'm subtweeting you, even though it's not a tweet, and I'm in like, like I can't say at Gdula 13 because you're not on Threads. So like I don't know. Like I just feel weird. Like I'm subtweeting. I feel guilty.
I might be. My Instagram's private. Some Devontae Adams lovers, I think, tried to hack my account because he wasn't very good for 2 years to start his career, and so shout out to that whole mindset.
Well, unprotected because I think they've gone away, and then join Threads so that I can tag you and not feel like I'm subtweeting you.
Okay.
I'm on Threads at Jim.Sonis, but on Twitter primarily at JimSonis. You can also find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your DFS contest in Week 10. We'll talk to you once again Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.